morning to those who are joining us online as well. It's a wonderful Sunday here in this beautiful temple. I'll read from Rays of the One Light, Weekly Commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. Today's topic, by thinking, can we arrive at understanding? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. There are many places in the Gospels where we see Jesus in open conflict with the Pharisees, that is to say, with man-made as opposed to true mystical tradition. In the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 15, we see a good example of how they and he locked horns. Then some of the scribes and Pharisees from Jerusalem came and asked Jesus, "Why do your disciples break our ancient tradition and eat their food without washing their hands properly first?" Jesus, after scolding them for their hypocrisy in observing lesser rules so carefully while ignoring the much more important ones, said, "Listen and understand this thoroughly. It is not what goes into a man's mouth that makes him common or unclean. It is what comes out of a man's mouth that makes him unclean." It wasn't that Jesus counseled against such wholesome practices as washing one's hands before eating. In an age, however, when lesser rules were given too much importance relative to the truly important observances, cleansing the heart of impure desires, for example, he emphasized the supreme importance of loving God and of communing with Him. The Pharisees, the orthodox religionists of his day, in other words, had brought true religion down to a level of intellectual hair-splitting. They mistakenly considered the way to understanding to lie through a minefield of definitions, which they tried to refine to ultimate exactitude. Jesus taught, however, that the intellect alone can never lead one to truth. Without love, indeed, there is no ultimate verity. Without fixity of purpose, born of the heart's devotion, the intellect wanders endlessly. It cannot settle for long on anything. As the Bhagavad Gita says in the 2nd chapter, the intellect of those who lack fixity of spiritual purpose are inconstant, their interests endlessly ramified. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
So, this is from Whispers from Eternity. Father Divine, this is my prayer. I care not what I may permanently possess, but give to me the power to acquire at will whatever I may daily need. O Father, Mother, Friend, Beloved God, I will reason, I will, I will act, but lead Thou my reason, will, and activity to the right thing that I should do. I am the captain of the ship of my judgment, will, and activity. I will guide my ship of life, ever beholding the pole star of His peace shining in the firmament of my deep meditation. I am the lark of life, flitting in the skies of Thy cosmic presence, thirstily looking for the raindrops of Thy manifestations, filtered through the cruel clouds of silence, Thy showering omnipresence. Make me Thy lark, looking for no other water but the waters of Thy solace, flowing through the heavens of Thy being everywhere. So our topic today is, by thinking, can we arrive at understanding? So what is this understanding about? I think it can be extended to pretty much anything in our lives, achieving anything in our lives, understanding anything, but of course the main goal and the purpose of life is to understand the truth, to understand the source from where we came and to complete that loop, to go back to that source and find our oneness, that we have never been separate. Isn't that the fallacy? That one day when we'll wake up and we'll realize, I was just there with you, just the same with you. That's what God will tell us, because He is with us. But how do we arrive at that understanding? So I think there are two tools, God-given tools that we have. One is will, of course, because we need energy. Then without energy, nothing can be achieved, much less the great task of self-realization. So we need a tremendous amount of energy, and our energy is guided by our will. It's at our call. The will is our power to call upon the energy that we need to do anything. But we'll discuss how will can be of different flavors. Sometimes it's not so much of a friend. It takes us in haywire. So what kind of will do we need? And then will has to be balanced by the love, by devotion. Because it's only devotion that will develop intuition. Nothing else will help us realize God but intuition. That is the power of the soul to know God. And our intuition is there, but it's kind of way deep into the piles of everything that we have accumulated. It's such a big pile that intuition is lost in that pile. And we have to, get rid of all these excesses. And then by the power of devotion, that intuition will bloom. And yes, we will know God. So, as you can see, it's a balance. Just like everything else in life, it's a perfect, fine balance of something that might seem very outward, energy, and then something very inward, like intuition. There's we live in a country which is very outward. Americans are very, I can do this, and Master Paramahansa Yogananda used to love that. He used to say, be like the American. Not tomorrow, not day after, we can do it right now. He liked that attitude. And there's a joke that comes to my mind on this. Some of you may have heard this. So there were these, there's 4 different countries. There was the German, the English, the American, and then the Indian. And they wanted to, each of them were given the task of finding out about the camel. This creature, what is this camel? Okay, so the German is very, engineering oriented. So he goes and builds this fantastic, simulation of a camel and starts to study the mechanics of the camel. The British, loving his tea, takes his, stash of tea. He likes a little bit of comfort. And he goes to the British Museum and starts to, research and find a thesis on the camel. The American can do it right now, and money is no question, buys a ticket to the Sahara to go set up tent there and live there and study the camel in its original environment and starts to study the camel. Very practical. And the Indian goes into his room, closes all doors and windows, sits in meditation and prays that an essay on camel be dropped on his lap. So I feel neither one works that well if you let it go just by its own. We need a little bit of both the American and the Indian. So to move energy, so we're talking about moving energy, right? It's really important that we understand how to move energy. And the example that we find is perfect. It made sense to me, and I'll share it with you. So imagine you're really tired and your energy is low, and you look at this huge pile of dishes in the sink, or the bathroom that needs to be cleaned because you had a party yesterday and I had to go to work today, and it's a mess, and there's no ounce of energy left in you to do that. And then something happens that's positive. Maybe a phone call from a long-lost friend who is visiting your city. And you jump up and say, I'm coming. Immediate rush of energy. You see, it's all in our control, actually. If we can control our will, our mind, then we can bring upon the energy at will. So there's another story that's coming to mind. This time it's the farmer and the pastor. Remember how the pastor was visiting the farmer? And he had this huge field full of beautiful crop, like ready to be harvested. And the pastor says, "That's beautiful. This is beautiful God's creation." And the farmer turned to him and said, "Father, I wish you just saw it when it was just left to God. And I wish you saw this field when it was just left to God." Master used to tell this story a lot. What does that imply? We are instruments of God. And if we are, remember how there's a story of Swami Kriyananda, Master said, "Let God flow through you when you speak." And he took it literally. And he said, "Okay, I'm just going to wait for God to speak through me." And he went silent, waiting for God to speak through him. And he waited he says about 60 seconds is a long time for a speaker to stop talking. And when everyone started to panic, he again started to talk. But that is something we have to keep in mind. We have to be that instrument and allow that energy to flow through us. Each one of us here is a beacon of that energy. And that is our purpose in life, to stand wherever we are, wherever God takes us. We could spread that beacon of light, just being the instrument that we are, and put that instrument to good use. It's not a very active thing. It's a very inward thing, but very energetic. So let me talk. That brings us to different kinds of energy, to different kinds of will. So there is the blind will. When the baby, for the first time, when it exerts its obstinance, doesn't want to hear, doesn't want to listen to what the parent is saying, he's tasting blind will for the first time. Blind will doesn't look ahead, doesn't think, it just just does it, whatever it wants to do. And then it's not very useful, which we have, I'm sure, as adults, we have all experienced that. It's not a very useful thing to have blind will. And then there is the passive will, which is basically the absence of will. You see some people that are just, somebody's saying this, sure, and yes, of course, yes, of course, yes, of course. It's good to say yes, but you need to have your own process and then diverting your energy to that, whatever you believe. So passive will is also not very useful. I had a teacher, Korea, who used to say, don't be the sponge, Padma, be the sun. And passive will is the sponge. It just absorbs everything it finds around it. But no, dynamic will is the way of the sun. Before dynamic will is the thinking will, if you will. Thinking will is still in the mind, the intellect. We are so-called thinking, but we're not harnessing that infinite energy that is waiting to be harnessed, the divine energy. So thinking is still limited. And then comes finally the dynamic will, which is the true free will. It's very beautifully explained by Swami Kriyananda. He says, you wake up in the morning and you choose the color of your tie, and you think that's your free will? No, don't be fooled. That's the result of your past action, and that's the thinking will, if you will, which is being colored by your past actions. But when we go inside and we ask God, Divine Mother, to guide us, and then we receive that inspiration, and it doesn't happen one day, in a week, in months, in years. It takes a long time to learn that way of feeling that guidance through intuition. That will that comes to us and we execute that, we are that instrument of that divine will, that's the most free will that is possible. And that's a dynamic will that we need. And it's just a habit. Every time we are trying to exert our energy, we stop and we check. We check with whatever form that comes to us, that inspires us, and allow that energy to flow from that center of calmness and joy. That's dynamic will. And it never leads us astray. It takes us right into the direction where we need to go. So God contact first. That's what we need to get to kind of harness that infinite power that is waiting for us. As a physics teacher, I do this demo every year. So you guys have seen tuning forks, and you ring the tuning fork, and it's a feeble sound, especially in a class of 36. You can hardly hear it. And then I get the ahs when I just touch it to a little box, a hollow wooden box. That's a sounding board. And that's what all instruments have, right? That's a sounding board of the guitar. Just try strumming that wire just by itself, without that sounding board. There isn't any energy. And that's what we mean by the dynamic will. On our own, we are little tiny dots of energy, which is hardly, doesn't amount to anything. But when God works through us, when we allow Divine Mother to work through us, that's when miracles happen. And we look back and you can say, I didn't say that. I know I couldn't have said that. I know I couldn't have done that. And it was the divine that was flowing through you. And so that was the energy. And then the other part that we have to marry the energy to is devotion. And look at this. The seat of devotion is in the heart, and the seat of will is here. And without, as you heard in the affirmation, we cannot take a step ahead towards the truth without devotion, without love, because God is love, and we are all little dots, points of love. And we begin this journey by, thinking love for ourselves. It starts with that. I can't see anything beyond myself, me, mine, and mine. And then it starts to expand. We have families, we have loved ones, and we begin to care for them. And it feels great, that expansion. And then we need to expand even more because it feels even better. And then to people that we don't know, this love becomes perfected in its perfect expansion into the ever-conscious love of God, Satchidananda. And that's what will make us truly happy, that perfected love. But remember, loves, if you have energy in the heart, and women have energy in the heart naturally, and men have naturally the energy here. That's, I'm not speaking of everyone, but in general. And this has to be perfectly balanced. When hearts, I have seen this for myself, when heart's energy is not flowing upward, you can get very emotional. It can get very, choppy up and down and subject to this, very negative emotions. That is anything but happy. So then what is that magnet that will always keep that energy going up? And again, it takes practice. That's the magnet here, the will. And this is also the point of the superconsciousness. And that's why we meditate here. This is that great magnet that the more we focus and send energy here, it will start to pull up the heart's energy. And then we begin to feel true joy. What results in the flow of that energy is true joy. Joy that just bubbles inside us, that doesn't need any stimulus from outside. It's just there already, and we begin to experience Ananda's, our core understanding is that joy is inside you. That's what that is. So, only intellect. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I think we all have had experience. We tend to be intellectual, many of us. I'm speaking for myself. As I came onto this path many years back, I used to be a perfect intellectual. Try telling me something and I will test it many, many ways before I would, even put an ounce of my belief into it. The way of the intellect are kind of two. One, of course, is looking for mental stimulation, right? So it comes upon something new and gets very excited, loves to understand it, right? Is it true understanding? No, it's all in the head. And very soon it becomes bored. Because when it comes down, I'm talking about a spiritual path. It's excellent. Sounds great. This is so beautiful. But when it comes to actually implement it, guess where the implementation of the spiritual path is? Myself. All the hard work that I have to do, because everything is happening here. And that's when the intellect says, oh my God, this is just too hard, and tries to look for another path, maybe easier path this time. And it just goes from one to the other, and does not find that fixity of purpose that's needed to find the truth. And then there's the other kind of intellect that may stay in the spiritual path, but you find these people constantly, quoting the scriptures on the surface, not really experiencing it, but just being happy to be on the outside, and quoting and arguing and arguing intellectually. No, that's not the right point of view. This is and never and truth deludes him, because that's not how you experience truth. How do we come to the right understanding? Through experience. There's no other way. Imagine, how do I understand a mango? Well, I've never had a mango before. So what is this mango? And I do my research and I find out where it's grown and what the colors and what the different flavors it comes. But guess what? I've never ever tasted a mango. Does it do any good? No, you have to experience it. And I would say that is the greatness of all masters, but I can only speak of this path because I know about it. That's the greatness of this path. It is very experiential. Master is constantly, all true masters will do that, constantly encourage us to go into your own laboratory, he says, and experience this, do this, and this, do step 1, 2, and 3, and then come back and tell me how you're feeling. In fact, there is this story about this Hollywood actor. You'll probably, if you've seen a movie, you've seen him. He actually gives an interview. So he had all these, these bad habits. He used to drink, he used to smoke, and all kinds of other colorful things. So he had been going to different churches, and everyone tells him, you can't do that stuff here. No. And so he's been used to that. So then he comes to Self-Realization Fellowship, meets with Paramahansa Yogananda, and he says, I guess he's testing, so he says all of this, and Master says, sure, no problem. Smoking, no problem. Drinking, no problem. Womanizing, no problem. And he's stunned, like no one has said this, no other spiritual leader has said this to him. And then Master pauses and says, but if you do this thing that I'm asking you to do, I can't promise that you will still want to do these. I can't promise that. In other words, when we go inside and we begin to develop, we get this strength, the love grows, love for God grows, and that comes with courage. And that courage allows us to take these steps that are needed. And this whole process starts from within. It's like a little seed germinating and the tree growing. Everything else just dries up, shrivels up. You don't have to put energy into getting rid of something that you want to get rid of. It happens naturally. And they say when the flood comes, when the river is not having enough water, there are so many of these little tiny, getting stuck here. There's this lots of garbage here, and the twigs are here, and they're all stuck. But when the flood comes, it just pulls everything away. And that's exactly how it happens with us. When the energy flows, we really don't have to worry about anything. We just enjoy it. So yes, the beginning of the spiritual path needs a little bit of discipline. We have to kind of put our will there and show up with our appointment with God. But as that grows, good cheese, bad cheese, we begin to lose the taste for bad cheese. It doesn't stimulate us anymore. And life becomes just more and more joyful naturally, because that's who we already are. And so we have to kind of catch ourselves when we are being that, that intellect just on the surface. We have to catch ourselves. This God is not something that we can analyze, and we cannot. He's beyond analysis. He's beyond our little minds. But He's ready to get into our nets of love. He's ready to jump into our nets of devotion, actually. We just have to throw that net and catch Him. And only then we can catch the infinite. That's the only way He has promised to come to us, through devotion. That is the way, friends. Not by thinking, but by pushing energy. And I have to emphasize before I end one more thought that, anytime there is a challenge in our lives and we want to get rid of that, we think it's good. It's good to analyze it. But then just, if you have a practice of meditation, just go inside. Hold that problem up, just silently. And you'll see some wonders happen. First, you will begin to get clarity of that problem. That's what intuition does. Our minds will not let us, because I think Einstein said it, that if you are thinking at the same level of the problem, we can never solve it at that level. We have to move up, and only from the top we can look at the problem and actually do something about it and solve it. So we need that energy, and we need that intuitive look. We need both, and do something about it. That's moving the energy. I have no idea how to solve this problem. Whatever coming to mind, go inside, ask for help, ask for divine help. Whatever little idea that's coming, push your energy. We have to put out a lot of energy in doing the thing that we were born for, which is basically changing our own selves for our higher selves. And nothing else gives us more joy. That's the only purpose that we were here. And that is which will give us the true understanding. The only reality that there is, the truth. We will be able to understand our